All right. All right, everybody. Good night. Here we are with Jubilee School Debt Collective's political education project. And we've been running a College for All series for about 4 months now. It's going to continue to run into mid-August. What we're trying to do, and we've had already excellent presentations that you can eventually check out our archives for, including from Marshall Steinbaum, who has a badass report that he used with the Higher Education Labor United and he shared with us. Thank you for joining us, Marshall. We're going to have Tim Kaufman Osborne, future presentation about Board of Trustees, a critique of shared governance as we currently think it. Really good stuff. We got other people joining us here, so let me let them or someone let them in. So thank you very much for that assist. Um, but we are here tonight to talk about one of the big victories over the last several years in Massachusetts, but that has implications everywhere, and that is the victory of the Massachusetts fair share tax. Max is going to tell us all about it, but I would say it's a game changer, not only in their state, but elsewhere. The other thing I want to say really quick is that it helps us answer this gotcha question, which is everybody always asks us when we talk about free college and debt cancellation, how are you going to pay for that? Well, these folks here have an answer, at least partially, to how you're going to pay for that. So we're going to talk about, Max is going to talk about what they've won, how they got the wins, and then we're going to have some time to talk about how we do it. So Max is going to have to hop at what 8:45 because you got to defend a Supreme Court decision. Is that what I heard?
No, we'll see. I'm trying to actually get more money from the NEA to support tax the rich campaigns in states around the country. So I have to testify on that. But you know what? Don't worry. I'll get a text about it, and we'll see if I can delay them a bit.
Okay, but before then, and we don't want to hold you from that because we need that money. But before that, what we're going to do is we're going to have Max give a presentation very briefly, 15 minutes or so. We'll have a time for a couple questions about Max's presentation, and then Max will do another short presentation where get into some other nuts and bolts that we really need to think about and study. And from there, we'll have a group discussion. Max will stay on as long as he can. And if Max hops off, then I feel confident in the crew here to make that a very good conversation regardless. Uh, Max, there's a lot to say about you introduction wise. I'm going to keep it really informal. Just say it's been a real pleasure working with you over the last several years. Max is outgoing president of the Massachusetts Teacher Association, one of the leaders, not only in Massachusetts, but also across the country on the Tax the Rich campaign. And it's a real honor to have you here because we've been collaborating for a while now, and it means a lot, not only personally, but to Debt Collective as a whole and to a lot of people in this room. So, Max, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jason. And I love being with the Debt Collective. I'm just been so impressed with that work of all of you. And I will say that I think there's going to be a lot more collaboration between the Mass Teachers Association and Debt Collective in the coming years. So lots of good stuff going on. All right, let me dive right into it, folks. This is what I would like to do. I want to just, as Jason said, I'm going to give a few slides just about how we got to the Fair Share Amendment itself, what it is, what it's done. Then we'll pause, talk a bit, and then I'll come back to getting into the nitty-gritty because the goal is to try to have this, I believe, in a 50-state solution and ultimately Congress to tax the rich to fund the things we care about, including free higher education for anyone who seeks it in this country. And I will say that I got to UMass Amherst, where I teach, in 2001. We started talking about it then, and we have finally achieved something close to that. And it's because we were able to tax the rich. And so that's the goal here. All right, so let me just dive right in. If I can get this thing going, tell me if you see that. See this fair share. All right. This is one of my favorite scenes. Actions we did. We projected this onto this building. It's the Car Guru's Tower right over the Massachusetts Turnpike, but obviously it was just being built. And when we asked the Illuminator, the great group that got started out of New York City, we said, "Come on up." They said, we need a good canvas," and we identified this one. So we were projecting this and all during the campaign. All right, I just a quick note since we're talking about the Jubilee and we have Juneteenth tomorrow. I just wanted to note, like I assume everyone knows this, but that line in bold, of course, is what's on the Liberty Bell, etc. Liberty in our throughout the land. But if everyone doesn't know the rest of it, it's like a socialist version vision, which is all that you do. Proclaiming liberty is about wiping away all the property ownership and people go back to what they once had. So I just read this one. I've always been struck by that, and I love that this is called and you all have worked on the debt jubilee. That's what this is about. Every 7 years, a sabbatical year. You let the land, rebuild itself, and after 49 years, in the 50th year, it all goes back to where it started. So there's lot to be learned in looking beyond the lines that you see on that broken Liberty Bell. All right, let's see if I can keep going on here. Okay, fair share for Massachusetts. This was our logo for this campaign. And let me just do a quick summary. So we had a broad coalition that changed our state constitution. We were a flat tax state. We had to change our constitution to add even one more tax bracket. And what we introduced was this tax bracket for those making over $1 million in income. That's really important. Not total wealth, income, like wages and salary and interest and dividends. Okay, we did that after 2022, as it says, as after 107 years and five previous failed efforts. So don't think that things are easy in Democratic blue Massachusetts at all. A victory one is that we now have over, it's actually over, I've had to change this slide several times. We thought it was going to be $2 billion a year to fund public education and transportation, but it's actually gone up to 3 billion, and this year it'll be 3.5 billion dollars, and it's dedicated to public education and transportation. And I note for especially for this group here, public higher education is written right into that. The second is that we made the tax system more fair. We have an upside down tax system like I think virtually every state, which is the poorest people pay the greatest percentage of their income in taxes and the richest pay the lowest. And that's upside down. We made it fairer, not fair, but fairer. Then I'm just going to save that for the very end. Comment about the third victory I think we've got. For this group, I don't think we need to go in much detail, but I mean, this is one of the stories of the past 50, 70 years, which is that top line up at 70% is the richest people used to pay a very high percentage in their income, in taxes, and it has gone down to the point where we've crossed over a Rubicon where actually the richest are paying less than everyone else. And that is responsible for the Democratic backsliding we're experiencing now, the control of by the oligarchs of our politics, but it's also is the austerity that is experienced almost everywhere. Just to add to that, it's gotten worse. Like this is the big ugly bill. Remember that it's $1 trillion given back to the very wealthiest, and they pay for it by stealing health care from the working poor. You know this, but that I just want to be clear. Those numbers, it's not an accident that they did that. You know this the sickness of this is that they said, yeah, we're going to take that money, getting rid of Medicaid, and we're going to give it back to the wealthiest people. These are some of the wealthiest people in Massachusetts, just a sampling of some of them. You'll see three of them are named Johnson. They're the family-owned Fidelity. Some of you may, if you're an academic, you might have some of your pension in Fidelity. What you see in the bold is how much money, how much their wealth grew during COVID. When people were getting sick and dying, they had the best years of their lives. Now, along with the growth in their wealth, part of that has been we're cutting taxes. In the US, across the board, we cut taxes over the past 30 or 40 years. Massachusetts, you can see, was one of the biggest tax cutters between 1977 and 2020. Surprising, right? But that is the fact. The other reason I wanted to show this slide is that almost everyone was cutting taxes. And this is part of the source of the continuous strain of austerity that we face. Total personal income, though, grew enormously in Massachusetts. I mean, we are an incredibly wealthy state. If we were a nation, Massachusetts would be the sixth wealthiest nation on earth per capita income. Okay, so it's not like there's not money for the things we need. There is more. This you can see. This is going up. By the end, it's going up exponentially, practically the total wealth. Obviously, it is not shared equally. It is shared only at the very, very top. Okay, let's see if I can move this forward. Oops, not sure what just happened. You all see that? Not sure why it won't.
Yeah. And
Let me keep
the
going.
powers that be
Okay.
are trying to keep you quiet, but keep going.
All right. So that's just like it's there's a $600 million total income. Like, what are we spending the money on? It's actually gone up to 700 million dollars that of income every year. What do you think we spend on K-12 education? What percentage of that? Anyone want to throw out a quick thought? It's small indeed. That's it. 3%. And then that little red line, that's the point 0.3 of 1%. That point 0.3 of a percent that we spend on total public higher education, 29 campuses. So that's that blue line, that blue block is what we could be spending, the potential. And then you see on some of the things that we consider most important, we brag about having the best public education system in the country. We spend about 3% of our total income on those schools across the entire Commonwealth. All right, and these you all know, like the direct result of the austerity, of the cutting of the taxes, is this austerity in state budgeting. So that sent um, costs of higher education going up dramatically. And you can see that we've crossed again this line where a good bit more of funding of public higher education is by the students and their families, as opposed to not that long ago, 25 years ago, it was down around 30%. That means the state was paying for the rest, as it should. Frankly, it should be much even further down than that. So this is the story you well know. Another piece that we really focused on is how this austerity as well is produces below living wages for our faculty. And Marissa is on here doing amazing work on paraprofessional ESPs, education support professional fights for living wages. But here are our community college faculty, our professors here at Northern Essex Community College are not making what the MIT living wage calculation says is what you need for one adult and one child. All right, that's just the hints of the background of what we've been facing. We being, and I will explain who that is, a coalition over had came together finally successfully after many different false starts to put forward this change to our state constitution. Amendment to the state constitution. It adds a surtax so that everyone in Massachusetts pays 5%, 5 cents on every dollar for their income tax. Now, if you for every dollar above a million, you will pay 9 cents on every dollar. That is an extra 4 cents. So your first $1 million of income, you only pay 5 cents on every dollar. So relax, everyone. You don't have to worry about how you're going to get hit. I mean, this is like a joke, right? Who makes that? It was predicted to make $2 billion a year, and it passed at that ballot in November 22. We had to go through an elaborate process, which I can explain. Probably not unique to Massachusetts. Actually, I think it's very similar to what happens in Pennsylvania. I know obviously some of you are there. Okay, this is I won't stay long in this, but I wanted you to see it's a pretty short and simple, clear idea. This is the actual constitutional amendment, but you see how we put right in front and center exactly what it was for, to provide the resources for quality public education and affordable public colleges and universities, and for the repair and maintenance of roads, bridges, and public transportation. And that's so this is the ballot initiative that was won in 2022 and it started in January of 2023. You can see here the victory. I will note I'm just having a little arrow pointing at my own town, which clearly had one of the highest rates of supporting. I live in Amherst, Massachusetts. You can see the West is the Revolutionary West is where the greatest strength was it, as well as the Berkeley of the East, Cambridge and Somerville. There you can see towards the Boston area. But I also want to note, look on the right side, we won 52 to 48. It's a real victory. I would have taken one vote over 50%, but the point is, even this, which only affects 7/10 of 1% of households in Massachusetts, about 25,000 households out of 7 million people. Despite that, the fear of taxation, the lies and misrepresentations of the other side led to only a narrow victory. All right, let me just quickly focus on this and we'll pause. Because I really feel like we often talk about how much money is brought in and we talk about the policies, but let's see what the results have been. We have a huge increase in funding for public education, especially, and it has funded a formula that has helped the neediest districts. Universal school meals, every student in every single school gets its breakfast and lunch, hopefully forever. Free regional buses, public transport in the regions. It's actually grown up more. It's more money than that, but for public transportation, roads and bridges, fixing the subway in Boston, but also a lot more in the communities. You can see it's gone up to 3.5 billion this year. The millionaires did not flee. They did not flee. You will hear this everywhere that millionaires will run away when you raise taxes. It's just simply not true. In fact, there are more millionaires in Massachusetts, and they are wealthier from before fair share. Emphasizing higher ed. We finally achieved, as I said, now we have free community college, tuition and fee free for every student in the Commonwealth. For working class students, you can also go tuition and fee free to the four-year state universities and the UMass, the five campus UMass system. And we have seen a direct result. I mean, it's so obvious that I know the people on this screen. You make it universal free, simple and clear. 40% increase in community college enrollment. Everyone's talking about the demographic decline, how we can't have more college students because they're not there. That's bullshit. There are people out there who would like to get a college degree. They would like to pursue their passion, their calling, and we have seen that happen. I give an example of my mother, who's 91. She has a young woman who regularly helps care for her. She's an immigrant, and she is going to Holyoke Community College for free, and she will become a nurse. That will be good for her and her family, and it will be good for the rest of us. And that's one person who is benefiting directly from this. Obviously, there's a lot more to do and make it truly debt free, but that's the continuing work. We're about to pass a $3 billion bill to repair our community college, state university, and UMass system buildings. And then the Drive Act is to fill in $200 million to fill in for the money that Trump and the Republicans are taking away from the NIH and NSF and canceling grants. So this is kind of protecting the research mission of the UMass system. And then also, frankly, the governor came in and gave the biggest raises ever to state employees. I don't know if it didn't come directly from fair share, but because she knew she was going to have $2, $3 billion more to be spending on education and transportation, that gave the incentive to provide really decent wages. So let me stop there. Said a lot, but I'd love to gauge in conversation, answer some questions just on what the fair share is itself and what it's done.
Bravo. Max, do you mind unsharing your screen so we can see everybody pretty clearly?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And fucking A, man. That's awesome. We got some smart people on this call, and I was curious, what are some questions or comments? If you want to make a comment, you can either raise your hand or write the word stack in chat, and I'll call on you. But what are some questions or different thoughts that come to mind? Uh, Go ahead. Where we go? Astra, go for it.
Oh, I just said I did want to hear about I mean, it's so amazing. And it gives me and just seeing the timeline laid out, just thank you. But I think somebody put in the chat, and I just was plus oneing them, hearing about the strategy of linking education and transportation would be really interesting. Yeah.
Say that once again, Astra. The linking?
Linking of transportation and education.
Yeah, well,
And is that
maybe I'll
something, I mean,
get
just
to
as like, is that something like yoking it to another issue? Is that a strategic thing? Because we're thinking, how do we,
right.
want to do this in other places? So yeah.
Well, I'll get to that in the other slides. So the quick answer is it's not very fancy at all. We did a lot of polling and said what were the top issues, and we went with the things that people cared about. And frankly, it also caught different people. There's the whole education world, and then there's the building trades and the transportation folks who were happy to do that. So it built a bigger coalition, but it was no fancier than that. Than figuring what are the best things that we think
Not
the
fancy,
most
but
people
super
will vote for.
smart.
No,
Super
no,
smart. Yeah.
yeah. So
Other questions or comments? While we're waiting, Max, I was wondering, maybe you'll talk about this in the next section, section, but how'd you hold it together for 10 years? Like how'd you keep the struggle going like that?
So that's, I think, an important part. Look, there's been so many efforts, and I should say the last one that went to the ballot was 1994, to create a truly progressive tax system. Basically, like allow the legislature to set brackets, um, as many brackets as it wants. It lost 79 to 21. So that like killed it for a long time. People were like, forget it. It's never happening in Massachusetts. We got together in the early 2000s. There were different constellations of groups. And then finally in 2013, Raise Up Massachusetts was formed. And that is a coalition, and I'll maybe talk a little bit later about that, is labor, faith, and community. And frankly, the reason I think we stuck together is we also had some early victories. We won universal sick leave for every worker in the Commonwealth. And then we raised it to the $11 minimum wage, and ultimately we moved to the $15 minimum wage. So this group kind of got its sea legs together, and we saw victories together. And so that allowed us then to move to what had been so difficult, which was progressive taxes.
Super interesting. That coalition and also the fact that the small victories help keep the momentum up. That's really,
Absolutely.
yeah. Tiffany, do you want to ask your question out loud? And then after that, we'll shift to part two.
Sure. Thank you so much. This is so exciting, and I love everything that you've shared in terms of strategy. And I'm just wondering, were there specific things that were like more or less effective when you were trying to get people on board? Because
Yeah.
yeah, there's such strong narratives around how taxing the rich might impact people and how people relate to the wealthy class. And yeah, I'm just wondering what worked, what didn't work in getting people to really support your initiatives.
Yeah. Um, Tiffany, I feel like if maybe I just hold that because I'm going to address a bunch of that in the next section. Is that okay? I will just say that to Astra's question, I think I could just answer quickly, which is yes, I think it's be very popular now. And a lot of people who were naysayers, I mean, even the naysayers, they recognize the good it's done. I mean, this is they're like they're messed up in their minds, the people who are continuing to want to cut taxes. But they are also, at this other hand, saying, "Oh, we need to invest in our colleges. We need to invest in our transportation." But I think so many people realize that it's done a lot of great things, and the fear that it would somehow send the blessed millionaires going to other states turned out not to be true.
I mean, there are some that we want to get rid of, so, but
I mean, I really, I mean, politically, I've had to say they're not leaving, but I really feel like, get the hell out of here. Like you've been extracting for so long, we can do without you, you know? So, anyway,
Max,
yes,
before you go on, there is this point
sure.
that Tim Kaufman Osborne just raised in the chat
Yeah.
about perhaps there's a movement. And I know you shared an article the other day about that very thing. Do you mind just saying a word about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'll get to this as well. I mean, I believe in a 50 state progressive tax movement, and we're already on the way. I mean, Washington State is modeled after ours. That just passed. They never had an income tax before, and now they have an income tax. Maine just did a 22% millionaires tax. Rhode Island did a 3% millionaires tax. Illinois moved forward towards their kind of constitutional vote. I think it's going to come up in 2028. Hawaii extended a millionaires tax. California is voting on, well, there's a controversy there, but they are voting on extending a millionaires tax to fund education. It has become, we're at a moment. I think my biggest message to everyone is you, all of us helped create it from Occupy onwards to talking about inequality, to talk about taxing the rich. We have helped create this moment, but moments also occur and they disappear at some point. We got to jump on this moment, whether it lasts 1 year or 5 years. We just have to use the kind of that what's the constellation of shifts that are allowing for more places to say, yeah, we I think we're going to need to tax the rich to fund what we need. So in Michigan, unfortunately, there was a real great effort to do exactly what we did. Same numbers, I think. They wanted to go to the Constitution, 4 cents on every dollar over a million, and that didn't fly. And I will say part of that is what I'll get to later, which is that my state affiliate was not with them. There were not enough unions with enough funds to keep the campaign really going. And that's a really important part of this, building the coalition that has the people power and also the financial resources. Costs a lot of money to go up against the millionaires.
Okay. Do you want to take us into part two and
Why don't I
Audrey?
do that? Yeah, and people want to jump in as I go. That's cool as well. Let's see. Uh-oh, I think I just messed up. Let me stop that share, go back to where I was going. This should do it. No? Don't quite understand sometimes how this works. Just had it before.
Audrey, I bet you while we're
How's
waiting. Go
this?
ahead.
No?
Not yet. No.
Oh boy, let's see.
I wonder, Marshall might have the answer to that question about how many rich people are in every state, or at least where to find it. Other people, yeah.
Yes, there are rich people in every state for whatever that's worth, alas. The state's income distributions mostly follow the country's. There's slight variations state to state, but if you think of the 1% nationally, it's pretty much the same everywhere else, or
Okay.
in every state individually.
Thanks, Marshall.
Try one more time here. Is that better? All right.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah.
See,
All right.
you don't give up on the text, Rich. You don't give up on the share
I know.
screen.
We
I
can't,
like
don't
this
give it. All
guy.
right. All right. So I'll very quickly, I mean, some of these are obvious. The persistence, because things are moving much more quickly in states, but it can take a long time. And sometimes the processes, like in Pennsylvania, to do it, I think you'll have to go to the Constitution through two legislatures. It takes a while. We filed this thing in 2015 and, we were going to go to the ballot in 2018 and got kicked off. We moved to 2022. It took a long time to get this done. This is obvious. It was obvious when we started, I think, and it's way more popular now. I have a slide at the end. 77% of the people, maybe it's higher, want to tax the rich, especially when they know it's funding things they care about. Um, we have to be clear, however, is that the public is very skeptical of legislatures. And so we have to think about that no matter what they say, yeah, tax the rich. Yeah, we want to fund public education, but we're not going to vote for it because we don't trust the damn legislators. And so we have to figure that out. How do we navigate that in the campaign? And then, as I was saying, as a response to the earlier point, labor, and I will just say, I mean, there were a lot of unions involved, but between the MTA and the NEA, we spent $25 million on this campaign. And it was the best return on investment we've ever made. If you want to think in ROI, this is what we did. And I just think more unions have to open up their war chests. Not that everyone has excessive amounts, but there are big unions that have too much money in savings that they need to spend on events, on organizing, and on campaigns like this. And the broad coalition is key. So this is Raise Up Massachusetts. These are some of the organizations. Sorry. As you say, it's key unions were MTA and SCIU, but then there were some very active smaller groups who have no money, but they are very robust, have big memberships or big, very active, engaged memberships. So it was, all these different groups that you see here that were crucial. And we built a coalition that had a big grassroots table. Like at some point, it was 150 different organizations, but we also had a steering committee. But the steering committee was not just the unions that had money. It was also groups that had committed a lot of energy to our previous campaigns, gathering signatures on the doors and so on. So I think we maintained a kind of a coalition that people were invested in because it wasn't just like, oh, okay, yeah, MTA and SEIU are going to tell us what to do. So I think that we can go into more details about that later. Really important what we were talking about. I think Astrid, you were asking about this. In the past, people had just been talking about what are the rates or who gets to decide what the tax is. What we found is that it was a combination of a very high cutoff rate, $1 million of income every year, which again is less than the 1%, but very high, easy to understand. Do you make $1 million a year or not? It's the easiest thing on the doors I've ever done. You knock on the door, you say, "Do you make $1 million?" They say, "What are you talking about?" And I say, "Of course, I don't either. How about we tax the people who do?" you're right in there to the conversation. The other part was earmarking, and you can see at the bottom in highlighted when we did both a $1 million cutoff, 4% on every dollar over a million, and we earmarked it towards education and transportation. The combination, to your point, Esther, was the strongest point. We went through polling, and I feel a little bit embarrassed about this, relying too much on polling, but we did a lot of it, and we talked to a lot of people through this, and you can see, and when we did this, if it's very interesting, in 2015, I guess, when we were developing this, the high cost of attending public colleges and universities was the number one issue, the very top. I'm not sure it would be now, but it was the number one issue. And then you can see public schools and transit and the like were really important. What I want to note here, though, it's the main thing I want to show you here is on the left side, which is by the time we came to really getting into the campaign in 2021, what had flipped was that both issues still mattered. Making the tax system fairer and investing in vital services, those worked really well together. But actually, the fairness issue grew in importance. And I think it's part of the trend we're seeing now, which is the fury at the inequality, the fury at the concentration of wealth and the power the oligarchs are wielding. So that was just an interesting switch, even in the course of our campaign over a number of years, that fairness rose to over the vital services issue. Lots of words here, but really, it's very important as you all consider, and I hope everyone's considering how do we tax the rich. It's not like other issues in that you have some natural base. You have different types of people, but who have different interests. But revenue is not like a normal thing to that people centrally identify with. So you really have to persuade all voters. Often had started pretty high, but we have to retain our voters because as soon as they get like attacks from the other side, they start to question their vote. So we started up quite high in the low 70s in popularity, but we knew it would keep going down. One of the important things we did is we got out there early. We were out there knocking on doors in the summer. That's a big credit, frankly, to our MTA grassroots group. We hire 130 or 40 summer member organizers. I believe Marissa Freed from Cambridge has been one of those summer member organizers. They do lots of different campaigns, but they were out there in June, July, knocking on doors, talking about this. And we also went up on the air with advertisements early. That's why we needed a lot of money. I really want to say that at the last point, we decided to really invest in the grassroots campaign because guess what? Billionaires do not have people who voluntarily knock on doors for them. Surprise, surprise. But we have people out there, and we have people who are credible to talk about the needs for education and transportation. So we actually invested a fair amount. I can show you here. Now, look, the bottom line there, paid media was the biggest chunk, and it pains me to have to do that. And maybe there's better ways to do it, but we had to that's how we were convinced, and I believed it, and it seemed to work that we had to put that money to go toe to toe with the billionaires. But we also put a lot of money, you can see in the Partners Field program. It was bigger than any other campaign to that date, which is $2.7 million we re-granted to community groups all across the state who would then go out and hire people to do door knocking. Really important. Some of the campaign field staff as well. Those were paid, some paid canvases of community members out across the state. And you can see on the right, again, just reinforcing what I said, the vast majority came from labor. In fact, in the first 25 years of this century, labor has spent $50 million defending against tax cutting initiatives or winning the Fair Share Amendment. That's member dues, worker dues that have gone into this. And as I say, I'm very proud that our union set aside the money years ago, thought about this as a commitment over long term, going back to my friend and president, Barbara Mataloni, in 2014, all the way up to when we were spending all that money in 2022. The scale of the campaign, I don't need to go all through all this, but you can see we decided we really had to get business groups, small businesses involved, lots of unions, lots of regional organizing where the other side would not be. And we knocked on 1 million doors, 2 million dials. We got 230,000 voters who we identified before election day as yes voters, which made it so much easier. I mean, we banked basically a fifth of the votes we needed. And then we're able to go out and really hit those last days with other people. I'm going
In
to,
Massachusetts,
oops.
we're
I think we maybe don't have time for the ads. I think I'll move forward. I can show those maybe later if you want.
doing.
Um, Now, I guess I want to just quickly end on like when you win something, especially against capital, capital will respond and they're enablers. So our governor, Democratic Governor Maura Healey, launched and successfully won in the legislature a $1 billion tax cut in the year right after we won. Yeah, exactly, Astra. I'm like, literally, that's what I was doing all day. Like, are you kidding me? Now, some of those tax cuts went to the right people, working people, but literally one of the tax cuts was a $50 credit for housing to make housing more affordable. Not a month, $50 for the year. Like it's a joke. It doesn't help anyone. And in general, I think we probably maybe all agree, I hope we all agree, tax cuts are not the way to achieve social justice and improved lives for working people. You build childcare centers, you make free higher education free, you invest in affordable housing. So that was appalling. I'm not sure we can ever get over that. The business community is trying to claw back their losses, and I am proud to say, June 18th, 2026, today, we won a crucial victory at the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts, and we kicked their ballot initiative off the ballot today. Supreme Court did the right thing this morning at 10 a.m. They said the description of it was messy, it was wrong, so they said it's off the ballot this November. They're going to come back in 2 years, no doubt. That's what they do. They wanted revenge. They're going to get revenge. They're going to try to get revenge, but for now, we have stopped that effort. There's still so many loopholes for cheating multinational corporations. Every state has these loopholes. You may not be able to go after an income tax campaign, although that is the biggest chunk of money. There's so many other ways to extract back or to return, I would say, the money that was extracted from working people. And then, of course, there's, and I bragged about all the ways the money's been spent, but there's also ways that they've misdirected the money to private childcare. It was supposed to be for public education. They've sent it to private childcare. They've even had little bits and pieces are going to parochial schools. I mean, the worry is that it becomes a slush fund. And then I guess the last thing I would say on this is, 3 billion and now it's 3.5 is still just a good start for what we actually need. We haven't even caught up from all the tax cuts that we did in the earlier part of the century. Um, so we're continuing on. We just at my last board meeting as president of the MTA, we pushed forward, got a commitment to move forward on a wealth tax that will get at where the real money is, wealth, not income. And as I said, the 50 state strategy, I'll be working with the State Revenue Alliance, with Mayday Strong and others. And, look, we've had so many, Washington State, Illinois, as I said, they already passed this digital ad tax, and they're also going to be moving on an income tax. Maine, the California, Rhode Island, New York, Vermont, Oregon's on its way. This is a moment to advance us as clearly never seen in my lifetime. It took us many years to move on this, and now there is a moment to do this. And increasing numbers of Democrats, Republicans, overwhelmingly support taxing the rich, especially to fund things that people care about. And I guess I'll just end here, really, which is this last victory, which I think is the most important of all in some ways, which is that if we did this, we taxed very few people. Um, they're not hurt by it if we ever worried about that. It has produced enormous life-changing gains for individuals and for the health and welfare of the Commonwealth. So why does it? My hope is that it opens up a door for us to say, oh, really? We did that with almost nothing? No, like impact at all? Like, how about we do it again in a different way? And we get more. We start talking about universal affordable housing, and we think about healthcare for all, and on and on and on. So that's sort of the my fondest hope of this. And there's us on that final day. And you can learn a lot more. We're going to continually update this, fairsharema.com, where you can see where the money has been invested each year. So each year we have to spend that money. So I think I'm going to end now.
Bravo. Applause. Thank you, thank you,
So,
thank you. Thank you for the work. Thank you for this presentation. And truly does open up the political horizon in so many ways. Absolutely fascinating. And Max, you are, I gotta say, I've been seeing you do this for a while now, and you're such a good spokesperson for this movement. And so thank you for the work on
Thanks a
all.
lot.
I think Max has a couple more minutes before we let him
Sure.
go. Maybe like one or two questions real quick, and then we can end with some last thoughts and about the next Jubilee school to come up, which will be Tim Kaufman Osborne. Um,
It's, so Tiffany, did I answer your question at all in that? I'm not sure I did. Right? I promised it, and I'm sure I did.
I think you did. Yeah, very
Okay.
much so.
Okay.
Great
Okay.
strategy
Great.
and tactics.
Great.
and maybe Aaron, if you want to just add, I think it came up a little bit in what Max presented, but you asked a question up above. Do you want to ask it out loud, maybe add an element to it?
Sure, yeah, I can do that. Thanks, Max, for the presentation. Really appreciate this. Super interesting stuff. My question here is, has there been any indication in response to this victory that we've seen a increase in tax avoidance strategies by the folks who were targeted here? Are they investing in that type of sort of service to avoid this? And I guess as maybe the follow-on piece. If they have not, did the folks who put together the percentage that was going to be assessed have an understanding or a notion? How far can we push this tax rate before it becomes something that they would pursue, where avoidance would become a viable response
Yeah.
by these folks?
So, Aaron, I mean, the other side is saying, "Oh, this money is you don't know how this is going to do." You know, every year that you would think, I mean, it's like you walk out into blue sky and they see rain. They're always saying, "This is terrible. It's about to be terrible." We don't we believe that most of the tax avoidance was already happening. I mean, that they already were figuring out those loopholes. No doubt there will be new ones they figure out, but. Um, people point to individuals who leave, but the main people who are leaving Massachusetts are young, sort of middle class people who cannot afford to live in the state. And it's just very clear that that's the reason why. And it's not millionaires, billionaires leaving to avoid this. And there's a lot of research to show that they are less mobile than the rest of us. That's the benefit of being rich is you live where you want to live. And you have your houses and you have your foundations and you have your country clubs. And so why move? You don't need to move. I will say that that question about 4% was very significant. I will say we had a big debate. Barbara Mataloni and I won the vote to go actually to 5%, which have produced another $1 billion a year. And we had to backtrack because people thought that was the end of the world. Why? Because 5% plus 5% equals 10. It's double digits. Everyone will vote against it if it's double digits. I don't mean to be mean to our other, there was a sense of like, no, that will topple the whole edifice. I think we could have won that. I really do. I think the main thing for voters was the $1 million threshold. They're like, yeah, those people are filthy rich. I don't mind. Do whatever you want to those people. But that is there that yeah, so that was the one tipping point argument that was made.
Awesome, thank you.
Raymond, you want to ask your question? And then Tiffany, if we have time, we'll get back to your second question.
Yeah, great, Max.
International.
Thanks. This is really great to hear about. I was wondering, you mentioned there towards the end that with the tax, the impact to the lives of the millionaires is kind of negligible, right? And I've heard statistics about a certain amount of income or wealth, happiness is not increased. Was there any messaging in your campaign that kind of projected that information, or did you use any of the those kind of talking points?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is we just emphasize that it's a small surtax, and we had lots of statistics to show that it really um, that it didn't have that it wouldn't have any kind of dramatic impact. But the main point was to say, you're not paying this, and look what we can do with this money. That was the main message we stuck with. The main debate, which is I think is really worth all of us, and as you consider tax campaigns to talk about, is how much you focusing on taxing the rich, punishing the rich, or individual millionaires and billionaires. We chose, and I showed you some pictures of them. We never went after any individual billionaire. I kind of wanted to. I thought it might work, but we kept seeing in focus groups and polling that people didn't like that so much, especially because unfortunately a number of our most prominent billionaires have things we like. Bob Kraft, owner of the Patriots. Jim Koch, owner of Sam Adams Brewery, New Balance shoes, So in other words, these were things that are popular with people. And so we just chose not to kind of play that so much. We talked more about fair share and how, that's where the money is, but not focusing on a kind of a harsh critique. I actually think it could work better now. And I know in Pennsylvania, for instance, there's the anti-gas campaign. So I just name that as that was some decisions we made. But I think even in the years as we were going through it, it started to shift. As I said, the fairness issue started to grow, and I wouldn't be surprised if we were running this now. And maybe when we do the wealth tax, it can be more pointedly focused on taking down the power of those of the very wealthy. I was just at a tax conference in Detroit, and there were some pretty stunning numbers to show how people, just regular people, get the idea that the concentration of wealth is undermining our democracy and that they want to tax them partly just to take away some of their power. I don't think we would have had those same numbers when we started in 2015.
Astra, go for it.
I mean, that's super, super interesting. We definitely have especially the Californians have some ideal villains, right? And the
Yeah.
tech guys. I just wanted to ask if there's anything, I mean, the terrain is changing. So it seems like some states are leapfrogging to a wealth tax, which seems like starting at that point's interesting. I guess I was wondering if there's any lessons in terms of, would you change the language? Are there ways to avoid some of the slush fund problems or the misuse of funds? Just, is there anything in terms of how you framed it, how the actual amendment was framed that you would change, or any sort of lessons, anything you wouldn't repeat, if you were doing it again?
Well, as I say, some of the numbers we might shift. We might be more
Mhm.
courageous in pushing even higher. There is one important thing. It's very technical, but you know, we we said something that's common in legislation. I don't know if it's in other states, in our state, where it says subject to appropriation. And that has means the legislature has to appropriate. So we couldn't have a constitutional amendment that said UMass Amherst Labor Center is going to get $200,000 a year. Like you can't allocate money, you can't appropriate money. But by putting it in there, we think it kind of made it harder for us to challenge the legislature if they start misdirecting the funds. I mean, frankly, and I sound like a Grinch now, but they should not be spending all the money they spend from fair share on childcare. It's not public education. And a lot of it, most of it goes, some of it goes to nonprofit, some of it goes to private, for profit childcare. There's no way that fits under the definition, quote, public education. But I've wanted to sue on that. And the lawyers say, when it says subject to appropriation, the courts will always defer to the legislature. They won't want to interfere. So that is something we might have avoided including in there. In terms of the campaign itself, I mean, I really feel like when I got to the end, it was a close victory. I don't know whether we could have had a much stronger victory, but there was nothing that stands out that we messed up on. So I really, and then most people felt like, yeah, you know what, there's no glaring like failure that we made. I don't think we quite anticipated that the other side would pretend that regular people would be affected by this. And now it's shocking, right? How could that possibly be? Well, this is what they did. They said, of course, you don't make $1 million a year. But remember how your grandfather bought that townhouse in the south end of Boston when it was, really a working class area? Well, now it's worth so much money. That's your retirement. That's what you can give to the kids, and you'll be paying taxes on this. And the truth is, the average house in the Boston area is close to $1 million. And so there was a fear about that. So we had to quickly pivot and produce ads that showed that actually, once you take all the various deductions, a house would have to be worth $3.5 million before you would even start to pay that. So that's what we added. I will say, um, what I really wanted to say was, people, your grandparents bought that house for $15,000, and now you're making $1.5 million. Pay your goddamn taxes. Like, I mean, that was not a good advertisement to make. So we just talked about how high the value would have to be before that kicked in.
Max, I don't want to keep you too long.
Yeah, I'm afraid should jump off.
Okay.
I would love to give, and I'm glad to talk to anyone, anytime, anywhere. I really am like committed to this post presidency. This is my going to be my activist commitment is to figure out how to tax the hell out of these people
Well,
anywhere. So
we'll have you at other Debt Collective events for sure.
for sure.
Thank you, Max. For everyone else, I'll do one plug for the next Jubilee School and then we'll log off. But thank you, Max. Round of applause. All right.
Bye, all. Good to see you all. Bye.
Bravo, bravo. And for everyone else, the Jubilee School College for All series continues on July 9th. We have a really, really interesting conversation to be held by Timothy Kaufman Osborne and Constance Penley about who governs our universities. And I think this is something that we need to pay a lot of attention to as we learn more about Board of Trustees and how they are impacting decisions today. But Tim and Constance have a really strong argument about collective governing of the university that we want. And they also have a very good tool to share with us about how to do research on board members, and also to build power to replace them. So definitely tune in on July 9th for that one. Thank you everyone for coming out. It's not often we get to celebrate a win, but we just got a win on Massachusetts we got to hear about. So let's keep the momentum going. Don't give up. This shit will pass and we will emerge victorious. So thank you everybody. Having a great night. Take care.